Hey guys, it's Jim from Audiomo here. Tomorrow I'm headed back into the recording studio to do more tracking. So today I'd like to tell you what the process I go through personally to prepare for going into the recording studio. Now some of these tips are pretty universal regardless of your instrument. Some of them are specific to the guitar, and some of them are just good ones to know in general, especially if you're the one loading the sessions themselves to bring into the studio. So for starters, the first thing I do when I'm getting ready to go into the studio is I map out exactly what I want to get done, and I'm realistic about the time constraints. If you're not familiar with going into the recording studio, you could go in thinking you're going to get a lot more done than time is just simply going to allow you to. You have to consider that there's time to set up the microphones, there's time to set up a drum kit if you're doing that, there's time to do checks, there's time to take everything down, there's time to load up sessions, and there's time you have to allot for warming up so you can perform at the best of your ability. So, for example, my schedule tomorrow is going to be pretty much like this. I'm going to go in at 9 a.m. The drums are already going to be set up because I have communicated with my engineer that I want to get those done first. The mic, that'll take me about 15-20 minutes to have the mics set up the way that I like, and then testing and stuff like that. So between give or take 9:30 and 12:30/1 pushing it, I'm going to do all my drum tracking. I have 7 songs I need to do drums for. I'm really confident on every single one. I'm well practiced, and it's not going to be a problem. I've done this enough to know what's within and what's not within my limits. After that, to serve the purpose of cooling down myself as well as provide another band member to be able to do their job, I'm going to go back into the control room, and the singer's going to go into the booth, and they're going to track 3 or 4 songs from there. That's about where his voice is going to allow him to go. He knows that, I know that, and we communicated that to the engineer. After that, any time left over is going to go to these guys. And that leads me to my second point. Know what gear you want to bring for each song. So, tomorrow is a lot of surf stuff for the project I'm working on. And I want to play a Jaguar. So, I'm going to have the Jaguar. It has brand new strings on it. You have to prepare with stuff like that. It's staying in tune. There are no electrical issues. It's tested. It's going to do exactly what I need it to do, and there's not going to be any kind of question of, oh no, what if something goes wrong? But in case something does go wrong, if you have a second guitar, always bring it. What I like to do in that case is bring an all-arounder, as I say. Now, for most of the time, I would bring a Telecaster, but I don't have a Telecaster right now. You might be looking at that pink one thinking, but that's a Telecaster. In the studio, a deluxe thin line with 2 humbuckers is not going to do the same job remotely as a 2 single coil traditional Telecaster will. So tomorrow I'm bringing a 339 with me as a backup and also do some layering on top. So now that I have my gear figured out and I know what songs I'm going to be playing each guitar on, make sure you're practiced. Do you know the material inside and out? A lot of people will think that they do, but when they get into the studio and that click track comes on, it can get pretty dicey for a lot of people. I've seen it firsthand. So I cannot stress it enough. Even if it's your own stuff, know your own material. You have to go in there. You're paying a lot of money. You have to go in there focused. You have to take it seriously. Otherwise, the engineer doesn't care. He's going to get paid either way. You want to get the most out of your money. The third thing I do isn't something I necessarily do before a session, but it's something that is really important that a lot of musicians don't do because it can be looked at as tedious and or boring. And that is get used to playing with a click track at home. Now, you don't need a DAW like Pro Tools or Logic to be able to do that, although there are a lot that are free, so if you wanted to do that, you could. However, there are sources online, like Online Metronome, just put it into Google, bring it up, and that's how you should be practicing your songs. So that when you do go into the studio, there is not an adjustment to you playing to a click track. That's extremely important. That is overlooked a lot. I've seen a lot of players, a lot that are technically even better than I am, when they go into a studio, they're pretty useless because they can't play to a click track. Now, on a more technical end of it, another thing I like to do is make sure that my sessions are all ready. And when I say that they're all ready, I mean that they're condensed down, and talk to your engineer because everyone's different, into a format that is compressed, small, and easy for everybody to get a hold into, so that you're not going to have a problem if you load in a gigantic session. When you go into the studio, that can take a long time to convert and to get onto the other hard drives. Another thing you should know before you go in is what gear they have available to you. And now that's important for two reasons. There are some studios that will all include everything in their daily flat rate. As far as anything that they have in the studio, you have full access to with no extra charge. But beware of this. There are some that will have things available, but when you get into the studio, they might try and upcharge you a little extra. For example, a guitar amp. I was in a position once, a few years ago, where I wanted to use a Marshall JCM 800, and they didn't tell me until after the fact that that was an a la carte item. So that cost me an extra $80. That's not cheap. And if I had known that, I definitely wouldn't have done that. Now, a lot of people will be upfront with you about that, but you have to be aware and you have to ask questions. Don't be afraid to talk about money. Because when you're afraid to talk about money, that's when you're going to get hammered with charges that, you don't necessarily agree to, but at that point, you've already paid for the session, you're already there. They're not going to give you the files until you pay. Going back to that, if you play drums, and I play drums, I was a drummer before I was a guitar player, and you're going in to record drums, know what kit they have. Ask them if the heads are in good shape. That is important. And if not, if you're bringing your own drums, then you need to make sure that they have new heads on them. I recommend just regular coated ambassadors. They are the best to me in the studio for every single genre of music. They're reliable, they're punchy, they're full, really, really, really good drum heads. But other than that, make sure your cymbals don't have cracks in them. Make sure that you bring multiple drumsticks. For guitar, bring a lot of guitar picks because you might lose them. An extra set of strings never hurts if you're kind of an aggressive player. But, like I said, that goes back to the first point. Bring a second guitar, or if you don't have a second guitar, communicate with the people at the staff and see if they have something in the studio that, in a pinch, you could use that for a recording. The next point, I've already hinted at this, you need to talk to the engineer. You need to basically tell them what you want. And when I say that, you have to set expectations. You have to tell them what kind of music you're going to be going for, what kind of sounds you're going for, what do they have available for you, what do you really want the engineer to do? Do you want them to be active in the conversation? Do you want them to just sit there and press record? This will solve a lot of awkward situations that could potentially happen, because if you don't communicate with them and say you're having a really bad take and they try to tell you that and you're not comfortable with that, or they recommend rather, why don't you try it this way? Some musicians are really sensitive and they might take offense to that, and then that's going to derail from the time that you have to record. When you are in the studio, your number one priority is to record. A big mistake that a lot of people make, especially nowadays, because everyone's doing everything at home, you can get really good results at home, is not taking into account how valuable the time is, how valuable your time is, how expensive your time is to go into a studio. You are paying good money for this. This is not cheap. You are taking this very seriously. If you're ready to shell the amount of money out to go into a real recording studio environment and put your stuff down onto a hard drive or tape, if you're really cool and you can afford it, then you need to be prepared. You need to go over these things. This is nothing to be embarrassed about. Money, preparation, practice, having good relationship with the engineer. You don't need to love or be your best friends with your engineer, but you need to work together, because the more efficiently you can work together, the more productive you're going to be able to be when you get into the studio. So we have our gear picked out. We know what amp we're going to go through. We know the order of which that we're going to be doing songs. We know the engineer and I are on the same page over the kind of tones that we want and his involvement. We are okay with our price. We're upfront with everything like that. And we've managed our time out on a flow chart, give or take, of how long it's going to take to do what you need to do in the studio. That's pretty much it. Remember, also, if you're not confident with something or you are not liking the way something is going, do not force it. A really good example of this, last time I was in the recording studio with my wife, we were working on a relatively new song. I had finished the drums, the bass, and the guitar on it, but when it came to my wife to sing it, it was not going well because she was not fully confident in the material. The engineer actually started to think, because he doesn't really know her that well, he thought that her voice was shot because she wasn't singing with confidence, she wasn't hitting the right notes, that she wanted to hit, And so he wanted to rap, and I said, no, don't do that. We actually cut the song there, and instead of just trying to make something happen that was clearly not going to happen, we moved to a different song. 2 takes, all it took. She crushed the one that we switched to instead. So if something's not working, don't be afraid to put it off. It's okay, it's not a race. Have fun. You're taking a real investment in yourself, in your music, and you should be proud of yourself for taking that next step to take it seriously enough to go into a studio. Because it is cool, all this technology. I got a lot of cool technology. I'm looking at it right now. But it's just not the same thing. There is that feel of the air pushing you when an amp is cranked in a studio, where you are banging drums, not worrying about your neighbors getting pissed off. It is a free and liberating experience, and it is where some of the best performances and art is created. Go in there with that mindset. Be positive. Go to enjoy it. Do not go stressing about it. It will not be worth it. Just have fun, do your best, make a plan, prepare. Boom. Enjoy. Alright, so what do you do to get ready to go into the studio? I just wanted to give you my thoughts, some advice, some do's, some don'ts. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to have the camera with me tomorrow. Just going to set it up, and you can watch how I do it in person through the camera. Kind of. But yeah, leave a like, comment, please subscribe. It really does mean a lot to me, all of this. And, you know, thanks again. Seriously, just put me in a really good place, and, you know, I needed it. So, thanks, guys. I'll let you know how it goes tomorrow.